What are the factors that led up to this declaration of famine?
Yeah, good to be with you, Joe Fazio. I mean, the main one is 15 months of absolutely brutal conflict. As you said, this is only the third time that there has been a declaration, an official confirmation of famine, but we have been warning of this. This has been our worst fear for months. And so ultimately, families, children who have been displaced by this conflict are not getting enough to eat. That is the basic facts of the matter. We are able to get in, but it is just not regularly enough. We are not being given the safe, sustained, regular access that we need to be able to provide families with the basics of life. And so you see the scenes that your viewers are seeing now. And this should not be happening in this day and age. We know how to protect children, protect families from severe acute malnutrition, from hunger. We need to be allowed to do our jobs.
So what are the main barriers to getting that aid through to the areas that need it?
There's fighting, there's brutal fighting. Also, the parties to the conflict have restricted. We're now in the rainy season, which adds another complicating factor. But we were able, just in the last 2 weeks, to get in to El Fasher with 4,000 cartons of ready-to-use therapeutic food, which is the high-protein paste that we use when we're treating children with severe acute malnutrition. And I have been in many of these nutrition centres, and it is one of the worst experiences of your life, being in a room that is full of children, full of babies, and it is silent. Silent, because they do not have the strength to even cry. But I have also seen the miracle of this recovery. And so one of these cartons of plumpy nut, of ready-to-use therapeutic food, costs less than 60 Australian dollars. You know, that saves a life, saves a child's life. So we need to be able to get in and access these children, but we also need the funding, and that must come from governments, but also from men and women in the street. UNICEF Australia has an appeal, unicef.org.au. I've seen the difference that this work makes. It saves children's lives.
How vulnerable, Joe, are the surrounding areas around this refugee camp that's had this official declaration? How vulnerable are the other areas to famine?
Incredibly vulnerable. There are 14 hotspots across the country where there is a very real risk of either this situation expanding, or it may just be that this is already happening and we don't have the access to know about it. You know, that is a very real possibility. And so ultimately, across the country, we're talking about 730,000 children who have severe acute malnutrition. Now, these are children who will die if we are not able to provide them with care and support. And so ultimately, when we talk about what we need an end to the fighting. That is the only way that we're going to be able to respond at the scale needed. So that means that the parties to the conflict need to sit down. They need to find a way to bring an end to this chaos and this heartbreak for families, for parents, for the entirety of the population of Sudan.
As you say, individuals can dig deep and give money towards this. What about the role of international leaders here? How influential can they be in this situation?
They can be hugely important. I mean, Australia has long been a supporter of UNICEF's work all around the world in conflict and also elsewhere where we work. You know, but it's a huge undertaking, and I think one of the challenges that we face is that when the IPC, when this famine body was created, the idea was that the world would pay attention when we reached IPC 3. That was when alarm bells needed to start ringing. We are now at IPC 5, and too often it feels like we have to reach a famine before the world pays full notice to this. So, you know, there are 25 million people. Now, if my math is right, that's almost the equivalent of the entirety of the population of Australia who do not have enough food to survive day to day in Sudan. You know, in the 21st century, we should not be seeing those kind of numbers. We have to be able to find a way to create a better future for people. And it's not just Sudan, it's all around the world, in Gaza, in Yemen. You know, this is... it gets to a point where you just throw up your hands and say, we need to find a better way than this.
Well, on what you're saying, there are a number of conflicts globally that are getting the attention of not just the media, but of world leaders. Do you feel like Sudan is sometimes forgotten in all of that?
I think it possibly, you know, I think part of the challenge is that it's incredibly difficult for journalists to go in and report, international journalists. There are, of course, heroic Sudanese journalists who are putting their lives on the line every day to bring these stories out. But I think for any of us, when we are able to tell these stories, when we're able to speak to a parent who is struggling to provide their child with enough food, that closes that gap, that empathy gap, because any of us can understand that feeling of waking up in the morning and all you want to do is make sure that your family are happy and healthy. So for anyone out there who's watching, I really would implore you, if you can, I know times are tough all around the world, but if you can afford to support organizations like UNICEF or others who are doing this work, please do, because it really does make a difference. But also use that voice and push our elected officials to use every ounce of influence that they have to call on the warring parties to bring it to an end, to find a peaceful solution.